when chaos comes back to the Middle East, the United States is going to tell Turkey, control those areas, and Turkey will say gladly. So this is a German general. His name is Christian Freudling, and he's a major general in Germany with the Bundeswehr. And here he is talking about the operation in Kursk. And look how excited he gets. He says something that's very bizarre. He says, for the first time in over half a century, foreigners are now invading Russia. Well, what happened over half a century ago? Oh, World War II. Oh, when the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, when they invaded Russia. Operation Barbarossa. Cue the playing of the German national anthem, everyone. You got Nazism coming back, Islamic fundamentalism. We're going back to history. So America's going to leave Iraq. America, like I've said this many times, America is gradually becoming more and more non-interventionist because America has been drained. America has been exhausted by its foreign policy. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, now Ukraine. It's very difficult. And America has been the main source for weapons for Ukrainians. And so America has been depleting a lot of its materials and things like that, things of that nature. So it's been quite exhausting and draining for the United States. And America is slowly becoming more and more disinterested and just getting involved. Now, the American people are completely just not interested in getting involved in other countries. It's just not interested. And this is one of the reasons why Trump got elected, because it was a reflection of the American people's bewilderment and just being tired of intense, exhausting foreign policy. So that's the plan. And what I've been reading in various articles is that once America really leaves Iraq, all the craziness, the violence, the ISIS violence, the bloodshed, all that stuff is going to be coming back. All of it's coming back. And my contention, or my hunch, is that when chaos comes back to the Middle East, the Americans are going to give the green light to Turkey to control those countries, because America doesn't want Russia expanding in the Middle East. Russia already has a presence in Syria, a very strong presence in Syria, because it is a major ally and really the biggest ally of Bashar al-Assad. And if chaos comes and America is not there, then America knows, and everyone and their mother knows, that it'll be an opportunity for Russia to expand its influence in the Middle East. The United States is going to tell Turkey, control those areas, and Turkey will say gladly, because Turkey has this aspiration of reviving its empire, reviving its power. So I'm going to read you guys some excerpts from this article. This is all highlighted. So after more than 6 months of talks, the United States and Iraq look set to announce a significant agreement stipulating that the U.S.-led anti-Islamic State coalition will withdraw entirely from the country over the next 2 years. And then you scroll down. So far this year, the jihadist group has conducted more than... So ISIS is slowly coming back, which is very not surprising at all, because people say they're returning. Well, in order to return, that implies that they had left, but ISIS never really left. From what I understand, ISIS fled into the desert area of Syria, or to a major desert area of Syria, and they've just been keeping low there. But now they're starting to bring back themselves in Syria, and they've been doing a lot of attacks recently. And they're even doing terrorist attacks in areas where you have American soldiers. So even with America's military presence in Syria, it's not stopping ISIS from acting violently. ISIS knows that there's going to be a vacuum in Iraq. And they know that America will be withdrawing from Syria. So they say, this is our chance. There's going to be a vacuum. So it says here that so far, the jihadist group, ISIS, has conducted more than 500 attacks across Syria, almost tripling its operational tempo over 2023. For the first time in years, the Islamic State is launching roughly the same number of attacks in regime areas as in the U.S. and SDF-administered areas of Syria. That is already ringing alarm bells, as U.S. Central Command suggested in a public statement in July. It says here nearly 10,000 militants remain detained in 24 makeshift prisons, some of which are highly vulnerable to attack. So you have 10,000 of these ISIS terrorists that are in these prisons that are terribly secured, that are just in terrible shape, that can easily be broken into. What do you think is going to happen when you see this sort of situation? I think, if I had to make a guess, an educated guess, I think these prisons are not going to help. These prisons are going to be broken into, and these prisoners, these ISIS guys, these thousands upon thousands of ISIS guys, they're gonna escape from prison. That's what's going to happen. And they're going to overrun Iraq. They're going to cause a ton of problems in Syria. It's going to cause a big problem in Syria. And the Americans are going to tell the Turks, listen, we can't let the Russians expand. Because if ISIS comes back with all their violence and bloodshed, the Russians are going to say, okay, let's fight ISIS. Let's help Assad fight ISIS like they did back in the day, back in, 2015, 2016. And they're going to say, we got to fight ISIS. The Americans are going to say, we can't let Russia use this as an opportunity to expand itself. So let's give the green light to Turkey. Let's enable Turkey. And that's why you see Turkey talking about making its own weapons. You see Turkey making its own drones. You see Turkey working to make its own fighter jet. Pretty soon Turkey's going to have its own fighter jet, because Turkey knows America is going to give us the green light. America is going to make this big vacuum that we're going to have to fill. We got to be a major military power. That's why you read about how the Turkish Navy has been expanding tremendously. You see Turkish naval ships on the coasts of Libya, Cyprus, Qatar. You see more and more of these ships. And why is that? Because Turkey is now beginning to act like a serious power, because it's reviving itself as a serious power. So it says here that 2 weeks ago, several foreign militants escaped. 50,000 women and children, primarily relatives of fighters and former residents of the group's state, remain within the Al-Hol and Roj camps, where living conditions are dire and extremists continue to operate secretly. So this whole thing's just a big-ass mess, because it says here 50,000. You got 50,000 women and children. How many of these children are teenagers? How many of them are about to go into their early 20s? So that's even potentially thousands more recruits going into the ranks of ISIS. So it's a big-ass mess. For now, the Islamic State is prioritizing its recovery and resurgence in Syria. Next door in Iraq, the network is a shadow of its former self, having conducted just 40 or so attacks in 2024. But the trend lines are clear, and the group's deepest roots and history remain on Iraqi soil. There is no question that as far as the Islamic State is concerned, expanding its Syrian surge into Iraq is part of its plan. So ISIS is going to try to make a big problem for Bashar al-Assad. The question is America going to say, yeah, let Syria get torn up by ISIS? Maybe for some time. Maybe for some time America will allow that. But I think what will happen is it's going to say, Turkey, you got to go in. And Turkey, I think, is going to further expand into Syria. Turkey already has a military presence in northern Syria, northeastern Syria, if you want to be more specific. But I think that Turkey is going to expand more. And I think this is going to be a part of the major conflict that is looming between Russia and Turkey. The announcement of a U.S. withdrawal from Iraq in 2 years' time will boost the Islamic State's confidence significantly. As troops begin to draw down, the terrorist group will unquestionably seek to step into the resulting vacuum. As reports from the Defense Department Inspector General continue to highlight, U.S. forces remain integral to many essential functions of an effective Iraq-based effort. Against the Islamic State. The prospect of an increasingly advantageous operating environment in Iraq developing on the heels of a resurgence in Syria will be seen as almost too good to be true for extremists. Here is the article here. This is from Al-Huda. And it says here, it talks about this spokesman, and what he thinks about what will happen if America leaves Iraq. And he said here that the spokesman of the Internal Security Forces, Asayish, affiliated with the Autonomous Administration, Brigadier General Ali al-Hassan, was quoted as saying that if the American forces withdraw, quote, we will see chaos that we have never seen before. Any withdrawal will lead to the immediate activation of sleeper cells. So basically, it's going to be a hellhole. Iraq is going to go back to hell because ISIS will come back. They're going to cause their violence. They're going to cause a lot of problems. And like I said, NATO will say, okay, we can't let Russia take advantage of this. Let's allow the Turks to do their thing. And Turkey is going to start expanding into Iraq. And they're already in Syria. They already have forces in Iraq. And I think America's going to say, expand. Go forth. While the United States retains the ability to carry out counterterrorism missions and protect against adversaries such as Iran, there is a question about the political will to do both the same, to do both at the same time. Bull added to Al-Hurab. He explains that with regional confrontations escalating and the United States having to confront challenges in Europe and Asia, the question also remains open about whether Washington will continue this open-ended commitment against ISIS in the medium term or not. So there's doubt whether or not the United States is going to be interested in actually dealing with an outbreak of severe and major violence in the Middle East. America is going to look for alternatives, and that alternative is going to be Turkey. The thing about Turkey is that Turkey is showing its muscle more and more. It's flexing its strength every single year, and that's why you hear about concerns in Israel about a rising Turkish navy off the coast of Cyprus, because there is a concern that Turkey could use Cyprus as a point from which to attack Israel. And that's a real concern. Now, here's another thing. Now, this is from a Russian publication. But again, I like to read both sides. I like to read the NATO Atlanticist media. But I also like to read stuff from Russia, because you do get details about things that you really can't find in NATO media, NATO-dominated media, Atlanticist media. So this is talking about how Ukrainians are currently in Syria helping Islamists make drones. So here's the thing. Here's another story. This connects. This is from Al Monitor. ISIS kills 5 Hezbollah-linked fighters in Syria. Very interesting. ISIS never attacked Israel. And one time they accidentally hit Israel, and they had to literally make an apology to Israel. Now, the Islamists are all about hating the Jews. So you would think ISIS's biggest enemy would be the Jews. But no, ISIS actually expressed hatred against Hamas, apologized to Israel, caused a giant mass of violence in Iraq, which gave the green light to the Americans to bomb Iraq and also to bomb Syria. And also, ISIS has been used as a pretext for Turkey to have troops in Syria and Iraq. I mean, ISIS has made opportunities for external powers. So, why do you see ISIS guys killing Hezbollah guys? Right now, who's at war with Hezbollah? Israel. And ISIS is killing Hezbollah guys? I think America wants ISIS to come back. Because if ISIS comes back in Iraq, who are they going to fight? They're going to fight the Shiites. Who are the Shiites? Iran's proxy. Who is Iran? America's and Israel's enemy. And then you have this story. Ukrainians are NATO operatives. They're NATO allies. They're part of the whole NATO apparatus. You have Ukrainians in Syria teaching who how to make drones? Syrian rebels. And why do they want Syrian rebels to make drones? To attack Bashar al-Assad. Why attack Bashar al-Assad? Because he's an ally of Iran and he's a major ally of Russia, and Russia is in Syria. It's not that complicated. None of this stuff is really that complicated. It's all very simple, right? Who's the enemy of my enemy? I help them. That's how all this stuff works. And it says here that a group of 250,000 Ukrainian military experts, sorry, 250,000, what the hell's wrong with me? A group of 250 Ukrainian military experts has arrived in Syria's northern Idlib governorate to train extremist militants in the use and manufacturing of drones. A source told Sputnik on September 17th. There is confirmed information that the number of Ukrainian military experts who arrived in Idlib, which is in Syria, has reached about 250. They have been distributed to industrial workshops and several sites in the city of Idlib and the countryside of Jisr al-Shugur to manufacture drones, the source said. The Ukrainian military is training militants affiliated with the Turkestan Islamic Party. Turkestan? Yeah, that's a Central Asian country. Yeah, right near Russia. With the Turkestan Islamic Party under the command of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham for the use of drones and technologies to develop them with regard to the ability to increase flight speeds, photography, and targeting. The source goes on to say that hundreds of drones were shipped to Idlib in batches as spare parts and under the guise of commercial civilian goods. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on September 12th accused Ukrainian intelligence agents of actively recruiting Islamist militants in southwest Syria and the Sahara and Sahel, which is in Africa, to carry out terrorist operations. Days earlier, Turkish newspaper Aynilik reported that Ukrainian government representatives recently met with members of Syria's Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly known as Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front. They're basically no different. They're no different from ISIS. In Idlib to discuss a drones for fighters deal. The newspaper said that in exchange for the release of fighters from HTS prisons, which Kiev plans to enlist in the fight against Russian forces, Ukraine offered 75 drones to the extremist organization. And it says here that in July 2022, Sputnik cited a source as saying that the CIA was recruiting ISIS fighters and training them in preparation for deployment to Ukraine. The outlet had reported months earlier that scores of HTS fighters were being released from prison in Idlib to be sent to the Ukrainian battlefield. You have ISIS attacking Hezbollah, which is an enemy of Israel. They ambushed a bunch of Hezbollah guys in Syria. They killed 5 of them. And then you have Ukrainians who are allies of the Americans, allies of NATO, going to Syria to help Syrian Islamists who ideologically are no different from ISIS. It's obvious what's going on. The Americans support the revitalization of Islamic extremism in Iraq and Syria. Why? What is the motivation? The motivation, I believe, is to give an opportunity to Turkey to control it because America doesn't really want to deal with it anymore. And they're ushering in just an antichrist Leviathan. And let's see here. I have another article here. So another thing that's happening is the Americans... the biggest threat to America, economically speaking, is China. China is the biggest threat to the United States because China has the second biggest economy in the world. And the United States wants to focus more and more on China. And I've said this before. There's many experts who are saying the same thing. There's people in Europe, people within the EU, officials within the EU who are saying it doesn't really matter who wins the U.S. presidential election. America is going to refocus itself on China. It's going to reshift its focus or shift its focus more so on China than on the Middle East or Europe. So with the Middle East, you need someone there to really control the Middle East as a check against the Russians. Well, who's that going to be? It's going to be Turkey, obviously, second most armed country in NATO, and Turkey already has a military presence in these countries. And what about Europe? Who's gonna represent NATO in Europe? It's gonna be the Germans. So America wants to shoulder the burden of Ukraine on to the Germans. It wants to put the burden of Ukraine on the shoulders of the Germans, and it wants to allow the Turks to expand itself in the Middle East to counter the to counter the Russians. America knows that if it withdraws, ISIS will come to fill in the void. That'll give the opportunity for Turkey to expand itself militarily. And in the case of Europe, it's a similar situation. If America begins to put most of its focus onto China, it's going to tell the Germans, you guys need to make a big, powerful military force, and you're going to have the revival of German power. So this article came out today on the New York Times, and it talks about this new defense chief for the EU. This dude, Andreas Kubilius, who is a former prime minister of Lithuania. And I highlighted some areas here, some excerpts here. Facing an aggressive Russia, a long war in Ukraine, and an uncertain American commitment, there you go, an uncertain American commitment to Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, as president of the European Commission, has created a new post of defense commissioner. So it says here that Mr. Kubilius will be a commissioner for the European arms industry, not defense itself. So the Europeans are planning on beefing up their military industry. His difficult job will be trying to push the arms industries of various European nations toward more standardized production and cooperative purchasing power and coordination. And it says here, in any case, the diplomat said individual countries would do better at coordinating military capabilities than Brussels. Well, which country is going to be the best at coordinating military technology, military industrialness, military innovation? It's going to be the Germans. The Germans are the industrial powerhouse of the European Union. Europe buys more than 60% of its equipment from the United States, plus another 15% from other non-EU countries. So making European weapons more competitive would be good for European companies and taxpayers, said Draghi. Mr. Draghi argues. Mr. Draghi is an Italian guy. And he's saying, listen, Europe is too dependent on America's military industry. We need to boost up our own industry. So the Europeans are working on this. They're planning on making their industries more and more active. They want to be more and more independent when it comes to military technology. Europe is wasting its common resources, he wrote. We have large collective spending power, but we dilute it across multiple different national and EU instruments. We are still not joining forces in the defense industry to help our countries to integrate and reach scale. Europe also needs to provide seed money. Mr. Grant emphasized that is the only way to advance research and development of next-generation weapons and so-called strategic enablers, like integrated air and missile defense, sophisticated drones, and intelligence satellites, among other things that are now almost exclusively provided and sold by the United States. So there you go. They want to do more military industry in Europe because they know that they can't fully rely on the Americans, because the Americans are going to focus more and more on China in the future. But it says here, but given the war in Ukraine and a U.S. concentration on the threat of a rising China, the question of European military dependency on Washington is no longer just a theoretical question, said Ian Lesser, director of the Brussels office of the German Marshall Fund. It's a natural inclination for Europeans to buy off the shelf from larger American producers. But Europe is in the process of shifting from seeing its own defense companies as national champions to thinking of them also as essential building blocks for stronger European defense. Translation, they are working on the revival of a pan-European military power led by Germany. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing the making of the revival of German power. That's what you're seeing. And now you have also the expansion of Russia into Ukraine, the further expansion. The Russians are dominating in the war in Ukraine. That's why the Ukrainians had to invade Russia, because they wanted to boost up morale, make the world think that they're actually doing a lot more than they really are, and to also divert Russia's attention to the Ukrainians in Russia, as opposed to expanding Russia's presence in Donetsk, in eastern Ukraine. But still, the Russians are dominating, regardless of what the Ukrainians have been doing in Kursk within Russia. The Russians are winning. And it says here that the capture of Ukrainsk, confirmed by geolocated battlefield footage analyzed by independent groups, brings Russia one step closer to its long-held goal of seizing all of the eastern Donetsk region, which it already partly controls. So the Russians are dominating. regardless of what the Ukrainians are doing, regardless of the fact that the Ukrainians are really just expanding into Russia, and they're not really expanding that much. I mean, they're losing in Russia. Russian forces are gaining ground in Ukraine, and Kiev is trying to disrupt that progress by hitting military bases and warehouses that are key to Russia's operations. And do I have anything else highlighted? No, that's it. So even the New York Times is telling us Russia is doing pretty damn good in expanding itself within Ukraine. But there are reports of there are reports of atrocities being done by mercenaries within Russia's borders, atrocities done against Russian civilians by mercenaries from Georgia, Poland, and France. Now, I haven't 100% confirmed these stories, but according to these articles that I've been reading from Russian media, they are witnesses who have come out to say that they have actually seen atrocities being done by these pro-NATO mercenaries within Russia's borders. So it says here that, hold on, music has stopped for some reason. Why has the music stopped? Yes, I'm still listening, YouTube. So it says here that Vladimir Maltsev, a resident of Sudza, said that in the first days of the Ukrainian armed forces' attack on Kursk Oblast, mercenaries were especially zealous in dealing with people. The Georgians, the Poles, the French, all these mercenaries, they simply exterminated people like cockroaches. Citing eyewitnesses, the agency's interlocutor noted that the Ukrainians themselves warned the residents that if they did not leave, mercenaries would come and leave no one behind. They would kill all the residents. Here's another article here. Let me get the translation. They threw grenades into the basements, regardless of whether they were people. They are not there or not. The Georgians were very fond of cutting civilians and slitting throats and heads, the woman said. Also, according to her, the Poles were very brutal. In addition, local residents heard German and English speech, including with a Georgian accent. So you had Georgian mercenaries speaking German and English. Here's another article here. And it says here, they shot at civilians who were trying to leave the villages. There was a video on the internet of cars being shot at, and I have seen this video. I saw one video of a guy driving his car in Kursk, and you see the bullets hitting the car. The dude's driving off the side of the road. And there are civilians next to them. She noted that the Azov soldiers did not spare anyone. They cut off the heads of old people, tortured children, and killed. A resident of Kursk reported that her husband's brother, who was volunteering to evacuate people from the danger zone, was injured at the hands of militants. His car came under fire, and the man himself was wounded. The majority of those who are bad are foreign mercenaries who really treat everyone badly. Even in our village of Krashnuktayo Broskoye, we have a French flag hanging. Everyone knows this for sure. So you have these reports of atrocities happening. Now, listen, there are people who say that this is all like lying or whatever. People read articles. These are articles. People who are journalists, they interview people. This is what they're saying. Has it been confirmed? No. But it wouldn't be surprising if these atrocities have actually been done. It just wouldn't be surprising given the fact that a lot of Polish people don't like Russians. You have French Nazis. You have French people who hate Russians. French Nazis who hate Russians. I mean, it's not like none of this is really surprising if it's confirmed 100%. So this is a German general. His name is Christian Freudling, and he's a major general in Germany with the Bundeswehr. And here he is talking about the operation in Kursk. And look how excited he gets. He says something that's very bizarre. He says, for the first time in over half a century, foreigners are now invading Russia. Well, what happened over half a century ago? Oh, World War II. Oh, when the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, when they invaded Russia with the help of other people, with the help of Finns and other people. So he gets giddy and excited about reminiscing about what the Germans did to Russia in World War II. So let's give this a listen. Look how excited this dude gets talking about Operation Barbarossa and how Operation Barbarossa reminds him of what is happening now.
Also ist richtig. Diese Offensive in Kursk hatte ein mehrfaches Rational, worum es den Ukrainern in erster Linie ging. War erstmal die Entlastung im Donbass, Entlastung zu schaffen, indem man die Russen dazu zwingt, dass sie Truppen in den Bereich Kursk verlegen müssen. Ein zweites Rational war eine sogenannte Pufferzone einzurichten, dass nicht aus dem Bereich Kursk quasi ununterbrochen in die Oblaste Kharkiv und Sumy gewirkt werden kann. Ich glaube, wir haben ja auch einige Bilder gesehen, wie es in Kharkiv aussieht, wo die nördlichen Stadtteile quasi täglich unter Beschuss stehen. Ein drittes Rational war natürlich eine Art Faustpfand zu haben. Es war auch ein Rational, die russische Propaganda der Spezialoperation Lügen zu strafen, zum ersten Mal seit weit über einem Jahr.
And his face all of a sudden changes. He becomes filled with glee. He is just filled with elation. And it's right when he starts talking about Kursk and how it reminds him of Operation Barbarossa. Look how excited he gets. Here he looks somewhat normal. Okay, whatever. He looks, he still looks weird, but he looks more or less normal. Right when he brings up Operation Barbarossa, his eyes widen and he starts acting so giddy because it reminds him of Operation Barbarossa. This is like if you were to see a Turkish general talking about Nagorno-Karabakh and he's like, we haven't killed Armenians since 1917. Remember 1917? And his eyes get all widened and he gets all excited. And people would see that and think to themselves, that's pretty weird. This general's bringing up Operation Barbarossa and how what's happening in Kursk reminds him of that. And look how excited he's getting. And his eyes stay this way for a while. Just watch this. All of a sudden, man, the Nazi aspirations in his head are awakened. The ghosts of the SS are back. For the first time in well over half a century, foreign troops are once again on Russian soil. Operation Barbarossa, start playing. Cue the playing of the German national anthem, everyone. And it doesn't stop. It just keeps going with the crazy guys. Look at that. I have zero doubt that this guy admires Hitler. I can't prove it, but just my own intuition tells me. I have no doubt this dude worships Hitler. The eyes are the window to the soul. Yeah, you got Nazism coming back, Islamic fundamentalism. We're going back to history. This is why I did a video some months ago, and I said we are just going to return back to history, everyone. That's what's happening. People are now becoming more racist. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but it's like people are just like, yeah, those Haitian bloodsuckers over there. Like, what the hell? All of a sudden, like the old school ass racism that they warned you about when you were in kindergarten, like that shit's coming back.